My name is Liz Miller, and I teach at Concordia University. As a documentary maker and professor, my practice is to make complex issues accessible. And one way I do this is by connecting issues to personal stories. My work is also about using stories to help people move beyond information and into action. There is an enormous amount of information about climate change circulating in the media, and yet I can't tell you how often I hear the question, so what do we do about it? The more you learn, the more you worry, and this can lead to despair, even paralysis. So what are communication strategies to help us close the gap between information and action? I'll answer this question through a project that I've just finished, a collaborative documentary about women and climate change with a network that I belong to, the International Association of Women in Radio and Television. For this project, hands-on, we shot 5 segments across 4 continents, Norway, Kenya, India, and Canada, of women addressing climate change in their local environments. I had a few priorities in making this project. For one, I knew that we needed to represent the international scope of the problem, but we needed to ground these issues in very doable, tangible, hands-on action. We needed some hope. We needed to involve and represent those who are most impacted. Women around the world are on the front lines of climate change, and yet very few are featured in protagonists as proactive protagonists. We also needed to involve the next generation. We needed young women in front and behind the camera on these issues. And we needed our production model to match the message. I didn't want to create a huge carbon footprint in a film about climate change. So what were the challenges? For one, we had to weave the stories together. I have a background in participatory media, so I was ready for the complications that come up when you're trying to coordinate aesthetics, formats, and languages. When you're making links across distance and difference. But I also knew that a participatory process can expand the reach of a project. Local directors know the local landscapes, languages, and the stories that need to be told, and they have their own networks to get the story out once it's finished. 5 directors, 5 times the reach. The second problem, carbon footprint. Collaborating with members in our network provided the global reach we needed with a minimal carbon footprint. But I still had a dilemma. I was directing one of the 5 segments, and I planned to profile Jasmine. A young Cree woman who lives in the traditional territory of Saikas and is organizing against the expansion of the Enrich pipeline. This was the story that had piqued the curiosity of my international colleagues who've asked me on more than one occasion, and I quote, "Have the Canadians lost their minds in the tar sands?" I wanted to explore the issue, and I love to be in the field, behind a camera, meeting people. But Jasmine lived 5,000 kilometers from my house. What to do? After a bit of soul searching, I contacted a camera person from British Columbia, and I directed the shoot from my home office in Montreal. But there was yet another hurdle in my quest to walk the talk. I started thinking about the cloud. And here I'm not talking about the weather, but that looming information system hovering over us. The network that had allowed us to make a low-budget film by women directors from across 5 continents. This system had its own footprint. I wasn't traveling on a plane to BC or to India, but my data was traveling. And how to balance my plans to distribute the film across emerging platforms and take into account the energy that is involved in this largely invisible network. My dream scenario of a solar-powered video camera and servers that rely on solar energy are not yet in place. And trying to change habits is full of contradictions. You overcome one, and there's another right behind you. But we do have to start somewhere. And for me this time, it meant not jumping on an airplane, not meeting Jasmine in person, but using a participatory approach and a well-established network. So I'm going to leave you with a short clip to introduce you to a few of the women that we profiled in this collaborative documentary that is now streaming on a non-solar server near you.
அது வந்து ஆடி ஆவடி இந்த மாசத்துலாம் வந்து மழை அதிகமா வரும். இப்போ வந்து ரொம்ப அப்படியே அது உள்டாவா அப்படி மாறி மழை வரவே இல்லை.
D'étudier l'environnement sur le changement climatique, c'est de aussi prendre conscience qu'il y a des gens qui vivent dans ces environnements-là qui sont parmi les plus touchés sur la Terre. Les déplacements sur la Terre, sur la mer sont plus difficiles.
Unless the needs of women and men are adequately incorporated into development programs, the programs are not going to be sustainable and the policies are not going to be effective. You need to work together to see how you can address ile mtatatue hiyo shida ya maji kwa sababu
trying to get in the way of the so-called national interest, but we are trying to sustain our lands, our waters, our way of life for future generations that aren't here.